I raised my daughter alone. Did every hard thing a man can do. Skipped meals so she could eat. Worked night shifts so she could sleep in peace. I thought love like that earned you a seat at the table. But this Thanksgiving, in front of her husband's family, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You eat like a pig. Don't embarrass me. Go eat in the basement." So I did. What she didn't know was, that basement would be the last place she ever saw me. And when the lights went out upstairs, so did I. What happened next will shock you. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I wasn't supposed to be there that year. Not really. It was one of those invitations that came more out of obligation than desire. You know, the kind, stiff, clipped voice over the phone, sandwiched between casual chatter and a fake laugh. Oh, and yeah, I guess you can come for Thanksgiving if you want. No warmth. No, we'd love to have you. Just that dead little phrase, if you want. But of course I went. I always went. Because no matter how grown she got, how many silk throw pillows she stuffed into her picture-perfect house, she was still my daughter. My only child. She lived in one of those new homes in the suburbs, the kind with a 2-car garage, a plastic wreath on the door, and a granite island that looked like it had never seen a dirty dish. Everything about her place felt curated, like a showroom. Even her husband, Mark, walked around in pressed khakis and that smug little grin like he was the damn welcome committee. "Hey there, big guy," he'd said when I arrived, slapping my shoulder too hard like I was some old coworker he barely tolerated. I nodded and stepped inside, clutching the bottle of wine I brought. I knew they didn't drink reds. She made that very clear last year, but I brought it anyway. Not for them. For me. A quiet little rebellion in a glass. The table was already set when I walked in. Perfectly folded napkins, name cards in delicate cursive, candles burning low. Her in-laws were all there. Mark's parents, his sister, and her boyfriend. Even some college friend who looked like he hadn't blinked in 10 minutes. Everyone smiled with tight, polite mouths when I entered, like I was a misplaced item they hadn't expected to see. And then there was her. My daughter. Sarah. She stood at the far end of the kitchen, arms folded, watching me. Not with joy. Not even irritation. Just calculation. Like she was bracing herself for my presence. I smiled and gave a small wave. She didn't wave back. Dinner started the way these dinners always do. Small talk served alongside dry turkey and artificial gratitude. I sat at the edge of the table, next to the dishwasher, while her in-laws laughed about ski trips and lake houses. I nodded along, fork scraping the plate, pretending to belong. But then I did it. I guess I chewed too loud. Or maybe I used the wrong fork. Whatever it was, she snapped. "Dad," she hissed, barely loud enough for the table to hear. But I heard it. "Can you not eat like that? You eat like a pig." I froze. Fork in midair. Eyes staring down at the untouched stuffing. The table fell silent. Her husband looked up, confused. Her mother-in-law gasped, not out of offense, but surprise. Sarah didn't stop. "You're embarrassing me," she said louder now. "Seriously, just go eat in the basement or something." She didn't laugh. No one laughed. She meant it. And that's the worst part. Not the insult. Not the public shame. But the sincerity of it. She wanted me gone. I didn't argue. Didn't throw a fit. I just stood up, picked up my plate, turkey, stuffing, cranberry, all of it, and walked. I could feel every pair of eyes on my back as I stepped away from the table and opened the basement door. No one stopped me. I walked down those stairs with my pride bleeding out one step at a time. The air got colder, damper. The light bulb at the top flickered once before the door creaked shut behind me. Down there, in that quiet basement, I sat on an old futon and started to eat. Alone. The turkey was dry, the cranberry too sweet, and I chewed every bite, loudly, slowly, deliberately. Let her hear it. Let them all hear it. The basement smelled faintly of dust and laundry detergent, that strange mix of neglect and domestic comfort. It was dim, the kind of place where light never fully reached the corners. I remember sitting on that old futon, the one she and Mark used to keep in college before they decided they were too grown up for hand-me-downs. I had carried that very futon up 2 flights of stairs once, sweating through my shirt, back when she was still in school. She'd laughed and said, "You're the best, Dad." Funny how memories can turn sour in an instant. I balanced the plate on my knees. The fork felt heavy. Every sound seemed amplified. The scrape of metal against ceramic, the small tear of bread, the slow, steady rhythm of my own chewing. Above me, muffled laughter drifted down through the floorboards. They had moved on, it seemed. I pictured them passing the gravy, clinking glasses, leaning into each other with that false intimacy that comes easy to people who've never had to swallow their pride. It wasn't even about the words, "eat like a pig." God knows I've been called worse in my life. It was the way she said it, the venom wrapped in embarrassment, the deliberate distance she put between herself and me. In that moment, she wasn't my daughter. She was a hostess managing an inconvenience, trying to sanitize her life of the one thing that didn't fit her curated image, me. I kept chewing, not out of hunger, but out of defiance. Each bite became a statement. You can't erase me that easily. I imagined the vibration of my fork against the plate crawling up through the floorboards, a faint reminder that I was still here, still existing beneath their perfect little dinner party. I thought about the years that led to this, the scraped-together rent, the late-night drives to pick her up from college, the way I worked double shifts just to keep the lights on after her mother left. I remembered the nights I fell asleep on the couch waiting for her to come home, and the way she'd softly kiss my forehead and whisper, "You worry too much, Dad." Back then, I thought I was raising a daughter who'd never forget where she came from. But somewhere between graduation and granite countertops, I became a burden. I wiped my mouth with a napkin, took a long breath, and looked around the basement. The walls were lined with cardboard boxes, some labeled Christmas, college stuff, wedding decorations. My life was scattered among her storage, old photo albums, my toolbox, a framed picture of her 8th grade softball team. In that photo, she was grinning, dirt on her knees, holding up a trophy with both hands. I had been standing right behind the camera that day, so proud I thought my chest would burst. I stood and wandered to the fuse box. I didn't touch it, not yet, but I stared at it for a long while. My hands twitched slightly. Years of electrical work had made me intimately familiar with those black switches and copper wires. I could fix anything. Lights, stoves, water heaters. I had been the man who always fixed things. And now, my own daughter couldn't fix the damage she'd just done with one cruel sentence. From upstairs came a faint sound of clinking glasses, then laughter. Her voice rose above the rest, bright, confident, practiced. "I told Mark we should have done 2 turkeys this year," she said, and everyone laughed. It was the kind of laughter that pretends nothing ugly just happened, the kind that pushes discomfort down deep where no one can see it. I sat back down and stared at my half-empty plate. The food was cold now. I took another bite anyway, chewing slowly, almost mechanically. Each swallow burned a little. My chest tightened, but I refused to let the tears come. I had promised myself a long time ago that I'd never cry in front of anyone again. Tonight, that promise extended even to the shadows. After a while, I poured myself a small glass of wine. The bottle sat on the floor beside me, a relic from upstairs I had carried down without thinking. I took a sip, and the bitterness stung in a strangely satisfying way. "To you, Sarah," I muttered. "To your perfect life." My phone buzzed once. A text from my sister. "How's dinner going?" I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. I could have told her everything. The insult, the shame, the way I was sitting alone in a basement like an unwanted guest in my own family. But instead, I typed fine. They cooked a lot. Then I turned off the phone. Some things were too humiliating to confess. An hour passed. Maybe 2. Time stretched strangely down there, like the dark itself was swallowing it. I could hear footsteps occasionally. Someone going to the bathroom, someone else washing dishes. But no one came down. No one checked if I was okay. Not her. Not Mark. Not a soul. I started laughing then, soft at first, then louder, until it echoed off the walls. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind that comes when you realize something irreversible has happened. The sound of it made me feel hollow and free all at once. When I finally quieted, I looked back at the fuse box again. The thought returned, sharper this time. I didn't plan it. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was something purer, quieter. Just balance. A correction in the universe. If she wanted me down here, then let her live with what that meant. I closed my eyes and pictured her face when the lights would go out. The panic, the confusion, the dawning guilt. Maybe then she'd understand what it felt like to be shut out, to be invisible. Maybe then she'd think twice before cutting someone down to impress her guests. I finished the wine and set the glass down carefully on the floor. Above me, the laughter had dwindled to a few scattered conversations. It was nearly midnight, the perfect hour for silence. I stood and walked toward the fuse box. The metal was cool beneath my fingers. I didn't pull the lever yet. That would come later, but I let my hand rest there, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. My heart slowed. My breathing evened. It wasn't anger anymore that guided me. It was clarity. I turned off the basement light and sat back in the dark, waiting. Waiting for the moment when the world upstairs would go black, when their comfort would crack open just enough for her to remember who had kept her warm all these years. I whispered into the stillness. You told me to eat down here. So now you'll feel what down here feels like. Then I leaned back, closed my eyes, and listened, really listened, to the fragile hum of the house. The faint murmur of pipes, the soft creak of wood. Every sound felt alive, complicit. The night was mine now, and I intended to make it long. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, but it was long enough for the furnace to kick on and off twice. Long enough for the clink of glasses above me to be replaced by the dragging scrape of chairs and murmurs of goodbyes. Their night was winding down. Mine was just beginning. I could hear Sarah's voice filtering through the floorboards, still overly bright, her hostess voice. Thank you all for coming. We'll have leftovers for days, she said, laughing. Be safe driving back. That forced cheer hung in the air like cheap perfume, and I could hear the edge of exhaustion creeping in underneath. She was tired. Good. I waited. Somewhere around 11:45, the last door shut upstairs. I heard Mark give his usual faux-polite chuckle, the one he saved for anyone not rich enough to be worth his full smile. The floor creaked with their footsteps moving from kitchen to living room, probably checking on the kids, fluffing pillows, stacking plates for the morning. Then her voice again, softer now. Where's Dad? I paused. My chest tensed, but I didn't move. Mark, she called. Did he come back up? Did he leave? I could hear her walking, door by door, opening and peeking in. Her heels clicked softly, then went silent. Carpet. She was heading toward the basement door. Dad? She called again, her voice carrying down the steps like a lifeline I wasn't ready to grab. Are you still down there? I stared at the wine glass on the floor. Empty. My plate sat on a milk crate now, fork resting like a flag on the battlefield. Dad, seriously, are you asleep? Her tone shifted, irritation laced with embarrassment. She wasn't concerned. She was worried about appearances, about the story she'd have to tell later. I didn't answer. The door creaked shut again. I heard her walk away. That's when I stood and faced the fuse box. The panel was old, familiar. I had wired dozens just like it in homes that couldn't afford electricians. My fingers moved with muscle memory, brushing over each switch like keys on a piano. I knew exactly which one controlled the second floor, which ran the kitchen, which ran her office. I even knew which breaker fed power to the garage refrigerator where she kept her boutique sparkling waters. I flipped the main switch. Instantly, the house above me went silent. A beat passed. Then, what the hell? Mark's voice rang out. Did we blow a fuse? Lights gone. Heat paused. Router dead. Everything plunged into a quiet so complete it had its own texture. Oh my God, Sarah said. What? Why did everything just go out? I heard them scrambling. Footsteps over hardwood, the rattle of drawers. Mark's voice low and annoyed, hers rising with sharp edges. Did Dad touch something? She snapped. He's probably still down there. Another pause. Then came the knock. 3 quick raps on the basement door. Dad. Her voice tried to sound gentle. It came out brittle. Could you come up and look at the breaker? I didn't respond. Dad? Seriously. Still nothing. She waited. Knocked again. The silence stretched, uncomfortable now. I knew she was picturing me sitting down here, maybe dozing off in the dark, or worse, angry. She had always hated silence. As a kid, she'd fill it with noise, questions, humming. She could never sit with discomfort for too long. That hadn't changed. Mark tried to reset something upstairs. I heard a click, then the sound of him muttering curses under his breath. Ugh, Sarah groaned. Where is he? Down in the basement. I leaned back against the cool concrete wall and closed my eyes. I wasn't smiling. This wasn't revenge, not really. It was just balance. A soft correction. Because she needed to feel it. The discomfort. The helplessness. The way a room feels colder when you're alone in the dark. I could hear them scrambling, trying flashlights on their phones, fumbling for candles, knocking things over in the process. A glass broke somewhere. Mark cursed again. Why wouldn't he answer? She asked, her voice tight now. Maybe he left, Mark offered. He wouldn't just leave. You told him to eat in the basement, Sarah? I didn't mean it like that. Didn't she? They bickered for a while. I sat still, listening to their panic ripple through the house like a slow leak. Upstairs, the kids woke up. I heard one of them crying. She went to comfort them, voice shaky, probably holding back tears of her own now. Not out of guilt, out of fear, out of realizing her lifeline had always been the man she dismissed. At one point, Mark stormed down the first few basement steps and yelled, "Hello. Are you down here, man?" His voice bounced off the walls. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. He didn't come all the way down, just stood there for a few seconds before muttering, "Unbelievable," and stomping back up. Time passed differently in that silence. Minutes felt like hours. I thought about her childhood, not in a soft, nostalgic way, but in fragments. I remembered her birthday parties at the skating rink, the scraped knees, the prom dress she begged me to buy even though I was behind on the mortgage, the night she called me crying when Mark proposed. You're the first person I told. And now, here she was, trying to erase me like a stain on her reputation. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard her come down again, this time slower, hesitant. "Dad," she said quietly from the top step. "If you're mad, I'm sorry, okay?" I shouldn't have said that. It was rude. She paused. I just got overwhelmed. There were a lot of people. I didn't mean to hurt you. Still, I said nothing. The silence that followed was thick. I could almost feel her guilt rising like steam. "I really need your help, Dad," she whispered. "Can you please just come fix it?" The desperation in her voice wasn't for my forgiveness. Not yet. It was for her convenience. For the world to go back to normal. But normal wasn't coming back. I stayed perfectly still, invisible in the dark. Eventually, she went back upstairs. The rest of the night dragged. No more yelling. Just low murmurs, pacing, doors opening and closing. Around 4 a.m., Mark finally gave up and went to sleep. I heard her trying to call my phone. Once, twice, then 10 times. It buzzed against the concrete where I had laid it face down. I never answered. Instead, I sat there and let the dark do the talking. Let the silence become a mirror. Let her sit with the absence of me. Let her wonder what it meant. At 5:48 a.m., I slipped quietly up the stairs while the house slept. My bag was light. I hadn't unpacked much. Just a change of clothes, a shaving kit. I left the wine bottle on the counter and scribbled a note on the back of an old receipt. For words. That's all. You chose this distance. I placed it by the coffee maker. Then I left. Quiet. Unseen. As I drove away, the sky turned pale blue behind me. The kind of cold dawn that makes everything feel washed out. I didn't look back. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. She didn't sleep. I knew that before the sun even crested over the roofline. You can feel that kind of exhaustion through walls. Not the kind that comes from hosting a party or washing dishes, but the kind that wraps itself around your spine and settles into your throat. The kind that whispers, something's broken, and for once, you can't fix it with an apology or a smile. It started with the calls. Buzz. 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 I hadn't turned off my phone completely. I wanted to see the calls. I wanted the log. 27 missed ones by 6:15 a.m., all from her. A few from Mark. One from an unknown number, maybe his sister? Someone curious why the Thanksgiving post she uploaded the night before had vanished from her feed. Maybe someone had asked, "Where was your dad in that group photo?" She couldn't answer. Not truthfully, anyway. I had driven through the night after slipping out before sunrise. Somewhere just past the highway turnoff, I pulled into a 24-hour diner and sat at the counter like I used to in my younger days. No expectations. Just hot coffee, eggs, and the chance to feel anonymous again. The waitress, a tired woman with a kind smile and a crooked name tag that read June, asked me twice if I wanted cream. Black's fine, I said. And it was. It really was. Back at the house, I knew the panic had begun to shift. Panic has stages. First comes confusion. Then comes anger. Then the cracks of regret. And finally, silence. That's where she was now. Upstairs, in her pristine kitchen, standing barefoot on cold tile, arms wrapped around herself. I imagined her looking at her phone, no new texts. Opening the basement door for the 5th time. Calling down in a whisper now. Less performance. More desperation. Dad, she might have said. Just that. But I was long gone. I thought about that silence as I drove back home. A 2-bedroom place on a quiet cul-de-sac, where nothing ever needed explaining. Where every light switch worked. Where every sound was mine. Where I could sit on the porch with coffee and hear my own thoughts again. I didn't check her messages. I didn't open them. Just let them stack up like unopened bills. One after another, time-stamped reminders that now she wanted me. Now, after the humiliation. After she'd used me like a prop in her performance of the perfect family. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? That dinner. That entire night. It wasn't about gratitude. It wasn't about family. It was about showing off. Hosting. Appearances. And I was the part of her life she was embarrassed to display. The rust on the silverware. But now the power was out. Now the lights were off, and the kids were crying, and Mark couldn't fix the damn fuse box because the man she dismissed, the man who ate like a pig, was the only one who knew that house's bones. I sipped my coffee and let that sit. Not out of spite. Out of peace. I wasn't doing this to punish her. I was doing this to protect myself. Because if I had gone back upstairs that night, if I had crawled up those steps when she called my name, what would have changed? She'd have let me flip the switch. Maybe even said, "Thanks, Dad," in that clipped, efficient voice. Then what? Back to the futon? Back to the basement? No, that was a door I couldn't walk through again. And by morning, she knew it. Because when people start to realize they've gone too far, they try to rewind the moment, not by fixing it, but by pretending it didn't happen. She called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was shaky, soft. "Hey, Dad. I'm just calling to check. I was worried. I woke up and you weren't here. I know you're mad. I know I said something I shouldn't have, and I hate how last night ended. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I was stressed. People were watching. You know how I get when I'm nervous. But can you please just call me? Just let me know you're okay." Click. I listened to it once. Then again. Not to catch her words, but to catch what wasn't in them. No ownership. No, I hurt you. Just excuses. Deflection. She was stressed. People were watching. I know how she gets. That was always the dance. She hurt, then explained. Never truly apologized. Never sat in it. And now she had no one to clean up the mess. The power would come back eventually. Maybe she'd hire someone. Maybe Mark's friend knew a guy. But she'd remember who had fixed it every other time. Who knew where the short wire was in the crawl space. Who could reset that box with his eyes closed. She'd remember the sound of her own voice echoing down to a basement where no one answered anymore. I spent that day in the garden. Not doing much, just trimming, watering, thinking. The sun was cool, and the breeze had that crisp October edge. My neighbor, Harold, waved from across the fence. I waved back. "Big holiday plans?" he called out. "Not this year," I said with a smile. Just needed some quiet. And it was quiet, peaceful, no pretense. No curated place settings or white lies told for in-laws' approval. Just me. The way it used to be before I convinced myself I needed to be invited to something to matter. By evening, her text shifted tone. Less apology. More worry. "Dad, please. The kids are asking where you are. Can you just say something? I didn't mean for things to get so weird. I'm sorry. Okay. Are you mad? Can you at least tell me you're safe?" The last one almost got me. That line, "Are you safe?" It hit different. Not because it showed care, but because it reminded me how little she really saw me. As if a man like me, built on grit and survival and duct tape solutions, couldn't handle one night in a basement. I didn't reply, and that silence, that choice to not respond, said everything I needed to say. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. That night, I left my porch light off. Not to hide. But because for the first time in a long while, I didn't know anyone my light. Not even her. The house felt different in the morning. Colder, quieter, like even the walls had chosen not to speak. Sarah's eyes opened before her body moved, heavy from a night of useless pacing and phone calls that all went to voicemail. She lay still, trying to piece the silence together. Something about it felt unfamiliar, unnerving. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from sleep, but from absence. Mark was still asleep beside her, face buried in the pillow, his breathing steady and oblivious. Of course, he'd given up around 4, after stumbling downstairs, checking the breakers again, and swearing he wasn't a damn electrician. His help, like most things he offered, came with a built-in limit. But Sarah? She hadn't stopped checking. Not the basement, not the driveway, not her phone. She'd whispered your name into the dark 4 or 5 times, hoping you'd answer, hoping you were still down there, sulking maybe, angry for sure, but present. Because that, in the end, was what mattered. That you were still there, that you hadn't really left. But when the morning light finally cracked through the kitchen blinds, and she padded across the cold hardwood in bare feet, something in her chest began to sink. The basement was empty, not untouched. Your plate was gone, the futon blanket folded, the wine bottle still sitting upright with one last swig left at the bottom, but undeniably, unmistakably empty. She called down again, just to be sure. Dad, nothing. She moved fast then, heart pounding, as if saying it aloud would change the truth. She checked the bathroom, no toothbrush. The spare room, your overnight bag gone. Even the porch, no jacket hanging by the door. Panic rose like acid in her throat. She rushed to the kitchen and fumbled with her phone, unlocking it with shaky fingers. No new messages. She opened her call log. 32 unanswered calls. 5 voicemails. A few from Mark's mom. One from her sister-in-law asking if everything was okay last night. She hadn't replied to that one either. Then she saw it. The note, folded on the counter next to the coffee machine, small and quiet, like it had always belonged there. She picked it up, hands trembling, and unfolded it slowly. You chose this distance. That was all it said. No signature. No sarcasm. No anger scrawled across the page. Just those 4 words, printed in your neat, steady handwriting. She stared at them for a long time, her mouth slightly open, as if waiting for more to appear. An explanation. A drawing of a bridge. A second page. But that was it. You had said everything you needed to say. Not in rage, not in theatrics, but in absence. You had left without the slam of a door or the echo of a shouted goodbye. You'd just gone, and she had no idea how to fill that space. Sarah? Mark's voice called groggily from the hallway. Did the lights come back on? She didn't answer. Her fingers were still clutched around the note. She read it again. And again. You chose this distance. It echoed louder than any fight they'd ever had. Louder than every argument she used to win by default. Louder than the way she'd humiliated you in front of people who didn't even know your last name. Because now she understood. You hadn't just left the house. You had left her. And for the first time since the words had left her mouth the night before, she finally felt them the way you must have. Standing there with a plate of food and nowhere to go but a basement you were never supposed to see again. Go eat in the basement, she had said, like you were furniture she could shove out of the frame. Now the frame was empty. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd once insisted on perfectly folded napkins and matching silverware. It looked ridiculous now. Too clean, too symmetrical. A stage set with no audience. The candles had burned down to nothing but waxy stubs, their charred wicks a silent reminder of the night before. Mark came in behind her, rubbing his face. Did he leave? He asked. She nodded slowly. Yeah. He'll come back. She didn't respond. Maybe he just needed to cool off, Mark said, pouring himself a glass of juice as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. You kind of snapped at him last night. He probably took it personally. She turned to him then, eyes sharp and tired. I didn't kind of snap at him, she said. I humiliated him. Mark froze, cup still in hand. I told my father, the man who raised me alone, who gave up everything so I could have this life, that he eats like a pig. I told him to go eat in the basement like he was some filthy animal I was ashamed to be seen with. Mark shifted uncomfortably. You were under pressure. Hosting is stressful. She stood. No, don't do that. Don't try to make this smaller than it is. He sighed, already tired of the conversation. You want me to call him? She laughed, but it came out dry, bitter. He's not going to pick up for you, Mark. He didn't argue. She picked up her phone and scrolled to your name again. The contact photo, a candid from her wedding, you smiling with your arm around her, felt like a lie now. She hovered her thumb over the call button. Stopped. What would she even say? I'm sorry. Please come back. I didn't mean it. She had meant it, though. In that moment, with her in-laws watching and judgment thick in the air, she had meant every word. You had embarrassed her. You weren't polished or wealthy or socially smooth. You didn't know which fork to use or when to nod and smile instead of speak. You were her past, and she tried to hide it like a stain she couldn't scrub out. And now? Now that past had packed its bag and walked out the door before the sun had even risen. She sat back down and stared at the note again. You chose this distance. And maybe, just maybe, you were finally right to do so. I didn't answer her calls. Not that day. Not the next. Not even after the sixth voicemail where her voice cracked mid-sentence, and she quickly hung up. I didn't do it out of spite. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it because the silence had become sacred. And for once in my life, I wasn't going to break it to ease someone else's guilt. I sat on the back porch that Sunday morning with a cup of black coffee and the quiet company of nothing. No deadlines. No expectations. No one asking for help and forgetting the thanks. Just the steady chirp of birds and the low hum of the world waking up without me having to catch up to it. There was peace in it. Stillness. A kind I hadn't known in years. The kind I'd always imagined I'd find once I retired, but never actually did. Somehow, I'd filled every pocket of my life with noise, helping, fixing, showing up, thinking that being needed was the same as being loved. But they're not the same. Not even close. Love remembers you in a room full of people. Love doesn't make you small so someone else can look big. Love doesn't serve you shame on a plate and call it dinner. And that's what she did. Sarah didn't just ask me to leave the table. She told me, in front of people who'd never shared a day of my life, that I wasn't welcome to sit beside her. That I wasn't good enough for the version of herself she was trying to project. It's funny. I used to think a parent's love was about unconditional sacrifice. That no matter how many times your kid forgets your birthday or rolls their eyes at your stories or looks through you like you're part of the wallpaper, you keep showing up. Because you're the parent. Because you're supposed to. But that kind of thinking breaks something inside you over time. Quietly. Slowly. You don't notice it at first. The little dents. The subtle hollowing out that happens every time you swallow your pain so they can stay comfortable. Until one day, you're sitting in a basement with cold food on your lap, and you realize they stopped seeing you a long time ago. That night was my line. Not because of what she said, but because of what she meant. There's no misunderstanding a sentence like, you eat like a pig. You don't fumble into words like that. That came from somewhere. A place she had been nurturing, quietly, for years. A resentment she never spoke aloud until the table was full of the right kind of people. She looked at me like I was the stain on her tablecloth. So I left. And I didn't just leave the room. I left the story she was writing about herself. The one where I was supposed to be the grateful old man in the corner who smiled politely and never made waves. That's not who I am. And it's not who I ever want to be. A few days after I got home, my neighbor Harold brought over a pie. Peach, homemade by his wife. He didn't ask for details, just gave me a slow nod and said, "Sometimes quiet is louder than anything else." I like that. I wrote it down on a sticky note and stuck it on the fridge next to an old photo of Sarah when she was 7, missing her front teeth and grinning like she didn't yet know how hard the world could be. I kept that photo up, not because I was holding on, but because it reminded me that the girl in that picture is gone. And it's okay to miss her. It's okay to grieve her. It's also okay to let her go. I started doing small things again. Fixing up the porch railing, organizing my garage. I cleaned out an old cabinet that had been collecting tools and dust for a decade. Found a stack of old Father's Day cards she made in elementary school. One of them read, "My dad is the strongest man in the world." I kept that one. Not to remind myself of who she used to be, but to remind myself of who I've always been. She called once more, about a week later. Left another voicemail. Her voice was calmer this time. Measured. "Hi, Dad. I know you're not ready to talk. And maybe you won't be for a long time. I get that now. I just wanted to say I've been thinking about everything. About you. About what I said. And how much I took for granted. You didn't deserve that. You never did. I don't know how to fix it. Maybe I can't. But I hope one day you'll call me. I miss you. I really do. She hung up. I sat with that message for a long time. And then I deleted it. Not because I didn't hear her, but because hearing her was enough. She was learning, slowly, maybe painfully, that not everyone you push away comes back just because you regret it later. Some people stay gone, not out of hate, but because peace isn't something you gamble for a maybe. I still love her. I probably always will. But love isn't an all-access pass to my dignity. And just because I raised her doesn't mean I have to let her unmake me. Somewhere out there, she's probably telling people she had a falling out with her father. Or maybe she's saying I'm sensitive, that I took things too far. That's fine. People rewrite history when they're not ready to face it. I've done it too. But deep down, in that quiet place we all visit when the lights are off and no one's watching, she knows. She knows what she said. She knows what it cost her. And she knows, finally, that I won't come running just because she picked up the phone. Because this time, I picked me. And I'm not sorry for that. If someone shamed you in front of a room full of strangers, would you forgive them if they called the next morning? Or would you walk away for good? Let me know where you stand. Because sometimes the greatest form of love is letting go, even when it breaks your heart.